Hi everyone. So this is the first official lecture for this class. So hopefully you have had the opportunity to look at the syllabus and the lecture, the video lecture that goes along with the syllabus. Also the first day introductions, there's a video for that with a corresponding PowerPoint. Hopefully you've had the chance to look at that. So you kind of know how this is going to work based on those first few. So it's going to be the same with the rest of these lectures. So right now we're going to be doing what is anthropology. So that PowerPoint is available for you just like with the other ones. If you go to our course shell and you go into files, you'll see a folder with labeled PowerPoint, and then all of the PowerPoints will be uploaded there. But before I get started on this, I want to just say something. So I posted an announcement for this in our Canvas shell, but just to reiterate, there was a little confusion about the textbook for the course, and I had to call like our department and find out like why certain students were having, like, it wasn't just one student, there were quite a few emails that they couldn't find the book online, like if they wanted to purchase it through the CSN bookstore, that the CSN bookstore wasn't showing it for our class. So what I found out, and this is what I said in the announcement, what I found out was that because these classes were originally scheduled to be on certain campuses, so for example, like this class was originally apparently supposed to be on the Henderson campus, you have to go to the Henderson campus bookstore website, and then you can find it. Then it's like really obvious, it's right there. But if you want instructions on that, I posted like some really quick instructions on the announcement on our course shell, so you can find it there. But just like I had said before, I think on the syllabus lecture, you don't have to purchase it through the CSN bookstore. You might want to price it out if you get a slightly older edition, as long as you know the chapters are pretty much the same, which I'm pretty sure, like, usually double check, but usually going back one edition or maybe even sometimes two, there isn't a large amount of information that's different. And you know, sometimes I think the book for this class is like $100, which is a lot, and I'm sure you have other classes too. So now you might not be able to find it cheaper on other websites, or maybe it's cheaper but it's going to take longer to arrive. Like, it's really up to you, like what's more cost effective, what fits better into like your planning, your timing. So it's really up to you guys what you want to do. But anyway, just so you know, in case you were confused or where to find it, that's where it's located. Okay, so we're going to jump right into what is anthropology. Let me pull this PowerPoint. So just like before, hopefully you have this lecture. Ideally, you have this video pulled up next to, you know, on your computer screen, up next to the PowerPoint. I have my PowerPoint on my computer, like right off screen, so you see me looking off. It's because I'm looking at my PowerPoint. Like I mentioned before, there were some apps I know that are available where I can like mirror my screen and you can see me in a small video. I've seen those. I had a colleague who did it, and it was just, in my opinion, the video quality was not that great. And so this just works better. I'm recording on my iPad, and my iPad camera's pretty decent. And my laptop is old, so if I even tried to video record anything lengthy, it's just not going to be good quality. And I want you guys to have good quality. And plus, now you have the option, if you just want to see me talking for a bit, you can, you know, pull me up as big or small on the screen as you want, and also you can just view the PowerPoint without me talking if you want to do that too. So it's really up to you how you want to do that. Okay. So the title of the PowerPoint is What is Anthropology? So this is just a basic overview of all of anthropology, and I think I mentioned this to you guys in the video, that if maybe you signed up for this class and didn't know what this class was about, that was literally me when I took this class like a long time ago. I just needed a science course, and I was a fashion major. I was going to go to art school, and I took well, it wasn't 102 where I went, but you know, intro to biological or physical anthropology. And it changed my life, and I changed my major, and I changed what university I was going to go to, and I got a master's degree, and I'm working on my PhD. So if you're coming into this class like, I don't really know what this is, that was me. So don't feel like overwhelmed or weird about it. That's a lot of students. You know, I get it. Like for a lot of classes, you're intro students, you just want to fill some requirements, you're not sure. But hopefully, like with this class and with others, you still find it interesting, you learn something, whether you change your major or not. Like you just, you know, you can take something away from it. Okay. So what is anthropology? So slide 2, on slide 2. So here I just have, so what is anthropology? So if you had to say what it was in like one sentence, it would be the study of humans. But if you think about that statement, that's obviously very, very general, which is why in anthropology we have 4 subfields. So here I have them listed on the PowerPoint. biological, cultural, archaeology, and linguistics. So like this class is biological or physical, same thing, physical anthropology. But I'm also teaching the Anth 101, so the Intro to Cultural too. So I think there might be a couple of you who are, I have you in both courses. So sometimes if I make a joke, maybe you hear me make it again, I don't know. Sorry guys. But so like if you're thinking like all of humans, that's anthropology. That's very general. So we have, of course, like in terms of like academics, we have it split up into 4 categories. So the biological, the cultural, archaeology, and linguistics. So now you might be thinking, well, okay, I'm not really sure what some of those are. We're going to go into that. So you have a really good overview of what anthropology is. So slide 3. So biological anthropology, what we will be focusing on in this class, and I am a biological anthropologist. So this is the study of, obviously kind of in the wording, the biology of humans, but also like our recent ancestors, our current relatives. So we'll be talking about like other apes and primates in this class. We'll also talk about paleo anthropology. So more specifically, I am a paleo anthropologist. So I focus not typically, sometimes for comparison, but I usually don't focus on Homo sapiens. I look at other species that came before us, either like directly in our ancestry or like indirectly. So some of these species you might have heard of before, like Neanderthals or Homo erectus, or like the Australopithecines. So we will be talking about those in this class. And then of course, like per this PowerPoint slide, there are so even in biological anthropology, there's multiple subfields. So paleo anthropology, osteology, primatology, behavioral ecology, forensic anthropology, and like the list goes on. There are many. And I think I have a brief slide for each of those ones I listed in the subfields. Like there are more than just those few I listed, but I listed the ones that are kind of more well-known. And I'm pretty sure I have a slide for each. Okay, perfect. So slide 4, paleo anthropology. So this is looking at those species that basically everything since our split with chimpanzees. In fact, where did I put that? Give me like 2 seconds. Okay, that was more than 2 seconds, but I'm very excited about getting to use this thing I bought. Okay, so I don't get to have you guys in a classroom with a big whiteboard behind me, but there are sometimes things I'm going to want to write down, so I purchased this cute little whiteboard. Okay, so if we're thinking about like paleoanthropology, what is it that we study as a paleoanthropologist? So basically it's everything since our split with chimpanzees. So we have chimps. Of course, the pen I picked isn't writing very well. Humans, it'll do for now. And we split with chimpanzees approximately 6 million years ago. So if you see this cute little chart, so we've got chimps, humans, about 6 million years ago. So imagine this is like, just time and like evolution is occurring. We had a common ancestor with chimpanzees. For those who are paleoanthropologists, they basically study like everything in that. Sometimes looking at modern Homo sapiens, but most of it's directed at those other species. So like if we're looking, maybe 5 million years ago, or like 3 million years ago, or like 2 million years ago. So like I focus most of my research on our genus, so the Homo genus, like Homo neanderthalensis, Homo erectus, Homo habilis. But there are those who might look at, like my advisor, he does a lot of stuff with like Australopithecines. So I'm throwing a lot of words at you right now. Like don't worry about this. Some of these terms will be more clear as we go over them later in the semester. But in general, what I want you to know is like for paleoanthropologists, they're studying everything since our split with chimpanzees. Okay. Let's see. Next slide. Slide 5, human osteology. So for human osteology, this is pretty much like one of the cornerstone skill sets you have to have as a biological anthropologist. Like if you decided you wanted to do like what I do, paleo, once you start working on your bachelor's, like upper division courses, you would very likely take a class just dedicated to osteology. We will talk about osteology in this course briefly, but if you take the lab component that goes along with this course, a huge portion of the lab component is looking at human bone and learning like the names of the bones and the features of the bones and all that stuff. So in fact, with everything being remote, I'm not sure how they're going to be running the lab. I know, because I teach it at UNLV, I know there it's because it's a hands-on class, so I don't know how CSN is going to do it. I'm not teaching it this semester there, but typically it's probably my favorite class to teach because I get to teach all the fun stuff that I like, all the evolution stuff, but it's very hands-on and interactive. I like it. Okay, anyway. But osteology, so what is osteology? The bones, the study of the bones. So you can learn a lot from the bones. And I've only listed in these bullet points just a few things. Most of these words you should know. So of course, like age and sex, you know what those are. Stature. So normally in class, I would say, who knows what stature? So it's height. So you can tell someone's height. You don't need the entire skeleton. If you just had any of the bones in the legs, the femur is the best one. But if you had the tibia or the fibula, or even the bones in the arms, you can determine someone's height within like so many centimeters. So that's really cool. And you probably are familiar with that if you watch any like forensic shows, like whether it's like a real show, like what sort of thing, like Forensic Files, where it's based on like real events, or if it's like a made up show like Bones. They get it right a lot of times, but not all the time. But you probably are familiar with this concept. Also, pathology, so that's disease. So not every disease you get will be present on the bones, but many are. Some that are like directly related to the bones, some that are kind of indirectly related. We will talk about that in this class. And ancestry. So we'll actually have a whole PowerPoint just on ancestry. So in anthropology, we use the term ancestry, but in like common conversation, you would probably use the word race. That's kind of incorrect for multiple reasons, and when we talk about this in class, we'll go over why. But like when we evolutionarily, anthropologically, we recognize that people, at least in the distant past, we have a very, like globalized world right now where we can move around a lot. It's very easy to travel, but that wasn't how it always was for a long time. And people stayed in the same area for generation after generation and became adapted to whether it was very hot or very cold or high elevation or low elevation, whether their food was mostly plants or whether it was like a lot of seafood. So we have certain biological adaptations to that. So we recognize that is something you can tell from the bones often. Okay. Slide 6, primatology. It's kind of the name, study of primates. So humans, we are primates. Well, we're apes, and apes are primates. We are primates, and we're mammals. I'm sure this is not unfamiliar to all of you, but we are primates. And so primatologists will study like our close, why am I blanking? Our close relatives. So like chimpanzees or other apes like chimpanzees, gorillas, gibbons, orangutans, bonobos, but also other like, monkeys, monkey species. And a lot of times they'll look at like per this PowerPoint slide, like the classification system. So how do we understand the relatedness of all primates? That's still something that's kind of always being updated and we learn more about all the time. Like we'll look at with DNA, evidence, of course, but also like just looking at the morphology, the bones, a lot of research into that. A lot of research into like social behavior and other types of behavior. Often when you look at primate studies, there can be like broader comparisons maybe to humans or not. So sometimes you'll see that. Doesn't necessarily have to be. Sometimes you can just be solely focused on not humans at all, just looking at just chimpanzees or looking at just, capuchin monkeys or something. Slide 7, behavioral ecology. So this is just looking at, this is kind of more of a newer field, but looking at the evolutionary basis for behavior. So also there's evolutionary psychology. So if you've ever taken like an intro to psych, like Psych 101, you'll probably get a very brief introduction to this, looking at modern human behavior from an evolutionary perspective. And I would probably argue, especially as an anthropologist, that almost all behavior can be explained by evolution in some way, either like a lot or mostly or some. Like percentage of the behavior. So behavioral ecology kind of looks at that, but very specifically looks at human behavior in terms of when there are resource constraints or like abundances in resources, how that changes like social dynamics. So that's really interesting. That's considered biological anthropology. Forensic anthropology, so slide 8. Most of you are probably familiar with this. Like I said, with the show Bones or a lot of those other, like crime detective shows. I like Forensic Files, and they have a lot of really cool stuff on this. But typically forensic anthropologists will look at, there's usually like a threshold, it's about 50 years, and the reason is because for forensic anthropologists, they're looking at things that can often be related to like legal cases. So if you find, let's say someone found a dead body or like, bone, skeleton of someone, and they could tell based on the evidence of the bones that it was like a murder. But if the murder, if they, dated the bones or evidence the bones were, let's say 20 years ago, that would be very different from if they dated the bones to like 2,000 years ago. You can't have a trial. So like it's a whole different process. You'd probably pull in like a bioarchaeologist for the older one, and then if it's within 50 years, there's a little leeway with that, but about 50 years, you'd call in a forensic anthropologist. Okay, number 9. So that was biological anthropology. We talked about some of the subfields. There are more, but those are some of the main ones. Now, cultural anthropology, a lot of subfields. It's kind of structured a little bit differently. And I have a few slides for those few that I mentioned, but before I move on, so cultural anthropology, so it's looking at humans, and often our ancestors. Usually for cultural anthropologists, they don't look too far back, but like early Homo sapiens, sometimes they'll pull in some Neanderthal stuff, but typically when you see that, it's paleoanthropologists who are doing that type of research. But cultural anthropologists will look at, human culture, how that is developing, how it changes, what that means for us as humans in like our social interactions, and also because we can never really separate the biological from the cultural. Humans as primates, we're a very highly social species. This is very common among many primate species. So there's often this interesting interaction between the evolutionary behavioral processes and the cultural implications, and we'll get into a lot of this in this class. So I have a few, I think. Okay, so subfield, slide 10, medical anthropology. So medical anthropology, if you just heard that term, you might think that sounds more like biological anthropology. But in fact, most medical anthropologists would probably designate themselves as cultural anthropologists because they're usually looking at, like from a critical perspective, like the effects, I think I have a few things listed, like the effects of like healthcare systems on people, certain like historical like references to medicine in terms of like different cultures, even like practices and procedures. So I actually took this amazing course. It was a graduate seminar, and this was like last year, on looking at birthing and maternity from a medical anthropological perspective. So it was like a historical, like cultural critique of, we read some really interesting articles and some great books, but looking at this like this interesting comparison between, like, as a biological anthropologist, knowing that female mammals can give birth without a problem, but then looking at some of the interesting human adaptations, the fact that we are bipedal, so we walk on 2 limbs versus 4, so our pelvis is shaped differently, which makes birthing a lot more difficult, and so because of that, we've created kind of social practices around that. So we have like midwives, but then even looking at it from like a more modern perspective, like where we have modern medicine and all these different like tools that are used, like forceps and different procedures that are often unnecessary, not always, but often unnecessary, and actually can cause problems. So anyway, the point of that is medical anthropology is more of a cultural, like critical perspective on anthropology. On whatever topic it's focusing on. Okay, slide 11, ethnographic analysis. So we, not in this class, no, never mind. In the 101 class that I teach, there is an ethnography we will be reading. So if you are taking a 101, you will very likely be reading one. It's basically they're usually fairly short, and basically what it entails is a cultural anthropologist lives with a community for a decent period of time, enough to get to know them a bit, like maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years, it depends on a few things, but they immerse themselves in that community, they learn a lot, and they write about their experiences. Now it's from a scientific perspective, but often you kind of get that more like personal narrative that you don't really find in a lot of other scientific journals, and like pros and cons to that. Do you want something that's just completely objective, which most people do, but sometimes kind of seeing this personal perspective can be enlightening in different ways, so it's very interesting. Let's see, slide 12. And this just says, like, in general, you can be a cultural anthropologist and just focus on any particular thing. Like maybe you focus on reproduction, and maybe you focus on, diet and nutrition. And sometimes it might be a critical perspective, where you might critique certain things that we've seen historically, or you might do like, data collection. It kind of just depends. Usually most cultural anthropologists have like a thing that they focus on, like I have, reproduction, diet, religion. They usually have like a specific focus. Slide 13. Okay, so now moving on to the third subgroup in anthropology, archaeology. Most of you are probably familiar with this. So archaeologists don't deal with any human remains. That's often a misconception. So archaeologists deal only with and I have it underlined in the PowerPoint, material cultures. So everything else. So if you were to stumble across like an ancient, site that was once a city, there would probably be bones, but there'd also be like housing structures and evidence of tools or clothing, utensils that they use for preparing or eating food. So all of that stuff, all of the non-basic, non-biological stuff would be what the archaeologist would look at, research, try to understand. And often you see like, and I think I actually have it listed on the next one. No, I was wrong. It's somewhere in here, maybe not. Oh, where is it? Oh, maybe I took it out. Never mind. Sorry, guys. I was going to say that often you have individuals who are bioarchaeologists. So they kind of are like this interesting marriage between looking at material culture and the bones and kind of, seeing what they can get. And bioarchaeologists, it depends on the person. They might say, oh, I'm a bioarchaeologist, but I have more of a cultural focus. Or more. Ooh, you okay? Ooh, my baby's got allergies. Waffle? Okay. Oh yeah, and other bioarchaeologists might say they have more of like a biological focus, so it really depends on the individual. Okay. I see her tail, so she must be okay. You okay? Yeah, okay. She's got allergies really bad. Okay. Slide, let's skip slide 14. Okay, slide. Some of this is kind of hard to talk about when I don't have to ask, I can't have you guys in front of me. Okay, so slide 15, I won't skip too much. Okay, slide 15, historical archaeology. Basically, I'll just say, like the thing I want to point out with this picture is, I took this photo when I was at this, waffle. I was in this, you got a hairball? What are you doing? Come here. Okay, you're just gonna be a silly girl? Okay. I took this photo when I was in anthropology museum back when I lived in Sacramento, California. And this was the point the artist was trying to make, and I think it's a good point. And if you look at this picture, you'll see, oh, it looks like some interesting carving from another civilization. There's like some figures, maybe some animals. And then if you look on the far right, there is a Rice Krispie, like little box of cereal. And the point is that whenever we look back at other cultures and other societies, we can interpret it any way we want, and we try to rely on the evidence, but sometimes it can still be difficult. When you have, for historical archaeology, that implies that there's some kind of written record. So if you have the written record, you can use that to compare, okay, see, this is the written record of maybe their laws or of, population size or something. So you can say, okay, that compared with what I'm seeing in the material culture. But if you don't have any of that and you're just trying to interpret, you might get it wrong, you might get it right. I mean, that's the point of science, is that other people come along, you try again, you try to build towards, objective reality. But sometimes, it can be difficult, and sometimes you get it wrong, and, there's nothing wrong with being wrong sometimes, as long as we're moving towards being correct. But this is the interesting thing about, archaeology specifically with material culture, is that it's hard to kind of really know. Sometimes things are really obvious, like if there's a food utensil, versus something that's artistic, what was the point they were trying to make? Like, it's hard to know. So just kind of keep that in mind. And let's see, slide 16, cultural resource management. So this is a field that you can get in if you decide you want to be an archaeologist. So whenever you see like new construction, like we see a lot of that in Vegas, right? Like new roads going up or new buildings, they have to usually call in someone from CRM. So someone has to come in and say, okay, this site is clear of any burial grounds or human remains. Someone has to kind of clear the area, because if it's not clear, if there is something important there historically, anthropologically, then we would, sorry about the hiccups. probably someone from like the local museum or university would have to come in and decide whether they want to leave it there or remove it or contact maybe the local tribe it might belong to. So it's a whole process. Oh, it was here. Slide 17, bioarchaeology. I knew it was here somewhere. Okay, so these are those individuals who kind of tried to look at both the skeletal evidence and the material culture and how those two relate. Okay, slide 18, linguistics. So the fourth subcategory of anthropology. So this is looking at language, changes in language, like the historical references, looking at migration patterns and how that relates to how languages change and adapt, and how we end up incorporating even into our own language things from different languages, the changes through time. Like, this is a very interesting subfield. However, not every university has this in like their anthropology department. You might see sometimes the linguistic department, like with like the English department. It just depends on how the anthropology deems it to be related or not. And also sometimes you might even see the biological anthropology, not even with anthropology. You might see it with like the biology department. So that happens every once in a while. And then there are, of course, subfields even within linguistics. So slide 19, we see ethno-linguistics. So this is looking at the relationship between language and culture. So how do we, like, how does our culture, the society we live in, how does the cultural experience influence how we understand, how we phrase things, how we word things, how we understand it conceptually, our perception of reality and how the words we use to define that, how that's related to our cultural experience. If you take the intro to, if you take the intro to cultural anthropology, I spend about a day talking about general language and culture, and I kind of get into some of this. It's pretty interesting. 20, so historical linguistics. So this is when, of course, historical linguistics is when we have written records. If we're looking at a culture from, 500 years ago, we probably have some kind of written record that they left in some way. So then it's not, you can refer to that when trying to understand the cultural or historical, linguistic implications. So I have a picture here, not the hello, this is dog one, but the one below that. So that is English. That's only about, I think, 500 years old. That's how much has changed in our language in just a few hundred years. Now, if you're looking at that, if you looked at it, usually ask in class everyone to read it, and I say, who knows what that is? Most of you have probably seen this, but not in this version. But it is the Lord's Prayer. I think it has like the first. You can kind of see that a little in certain words, but other words you're just like, But just a few hundred years, it has changed that much. Okay. Slide 21, and some more important concepts in general in anthropology that are important. The first one, so slide 21, what we call the four-field approach. So I've already kind of told you that, just in this PowerPoint, that there are four subfields: biological, cultural, archaeology, and linguistics. And for a lot of anthropological research, we try to approach it as, you can't really be so like, what's the word I'm trying to think of? You can't be so, I want to say compressed, that's not the word. You guys know what I'm trying to say, I can't think of the word. To where you're shut off from the other perspectives. So, and this is true, even if we're looking at like biology, we're looking at biological anthropology, maybe we're looking at why humans became bipedal. That might seem like a strictly biological thing, but you might want to think of the culture of the species at the time. What was the food they were eating? Did they need their hands free for tools? That's part of culture. So you have to kind of, there's always, not most of the time, there's somehow another subfield that you can kind of get an interesting perspective from it. So just keep that in mind. And then, of course, slide 22, which is especially pertinent for this course, evolution. So you can see I've listed some general definitions for the other three, but for biological evolution, there's a very specific definition: a change in allele frequency in a population over time. And we will talk about what exactly that means when we talk about that in this class in a future PowerPoint. In fact, I have this tattooed on me. A change in allele frequency in a population over time. So very specific definition for biological evolution. But in general, when we're looking at linguistics or cultural or archaeology, we are looking at general changes through time. That's kind of a major theme for anthropology, is that we're looking at those changes through time and why they happen, whether they were biological or whether they were cultural. What are the reasons why? Okay, so that's it. That's a very short kind of introduction to what is anthropology in general. And now we will, for the other lectures coming after this, we will be focusing on more specific things, but hopefully this gives you guys a good idea of, what is anthropology in general. You have a good perspective on that now. And I think that's it. I think I will see you guys on the next video lecture.